one of the genetic characteristics of what we call a natural elongated skull. Also, the suture lines. Here is the suture running across this way, but there is no sign of the sagittal suture whatsoever.
History books have lied to us. They claim the Americas were totally isolated until Columbus arrived. But a graveyard in Peru just smashed that timeline into pieces. Archaeologists digging in the Paracas Desert found over 300 skulls that break every known law of human biology. These aren't just big heads. They are missing the bone plates every human is born with. And get this, the DNA results just came back from the lab, and they reveal a bloodline that has absolutely no business being in South America 3,000 years ago. This is a glitch in the human species, the missing suture anomaly. In 1928, the world of archaeology got a wake-up call it didn't want. A Peruvian explorer named Julio Tello walked into the harsh, red desert of the Paracas Peninsula. This is one of the driest places on Earth. The wind screams across the dunes, and the sun bakes the ground. But beneath that burning sand, he found a massive city of the dead. This wasn't just a few graves scattered in the dirt. It was a complex necropolis, a city for the afterlife, filled with over 300 incredibly preserved mummies. The dry desert air acted like a perfect time capsule. It preserved hair, skin, teeth, and even internal organs. But when Tello peeled back the layers of colorful cloth, he didn't find normal human faces staring back at him. He found skulls that looked like they belonged to a nightmare.
This is a phenomenon that we see across the world and throughout human history.
They were massive. They were stretched backward, looming large and terrifying. For decades, schools and universities had a simple answer. They called it artificial cranial deformation. The story was that parents would take their babies and bind their soft heads with wood, cloth, and rope to force the skull to grow long. It was supposed to be a fashion statement. We know some cultures did this. The Maya did it, the Huns did it. But here's the catch. That explanation has a massive glaring hole in it. You see, you can take a balloon and squeeze it. You can make it long and thin. But you cannot add more air to the balloon just by squeezing it. The volume stays the same. The laws of physics and biology say that if you bind a human head, you just reshape the bone. You do not create more bone. But the Paracas skulls break this rule. Recent medical analysis has shown that some of these skulls are up to 25% larger in cranial volume than a standard human skull. And get this, they are up to 60% heavier. Think about that for a second. You cannot increase the weight of a skull by 60% just by wrapping a bandage around it. You cannot make the bone thicker and denser by pressing on it.
So this is one of the Paracas elongated skulls. This is one that we believe is natural in shape. And as I turn it, you will see the complexity of the design.
If you bind a head tightly, the bone usually becomes thinner because you are cutting off blood flow. The Paracas skulls are the opposite. They are thick, robust, and incredibly strong. This implies something terrifying. It implies that the growth was natural. These people were not deformed. They were born this way. They were genetically programmed to have heads that were massive, heavy, and elongated. The weirdness gets even deeper when you look at the top of the head. Feel the top of your own head right now. You can feel a line running down the center. That is the sagittal suture. It is the zipper where the two plates of your skull fused together when you were a kid. Every human has this. It is a defining feature of our species. But in many of the Paracas skulls, that line is gone, completely missing. There is just one solid, smooth helmet of bone. There is no crack, no seam. For a human to be born without this feature is incredibly rare and usually comes with severe health problems. But here we have a whole graveyard of healthy adults who lack this basic human feature. And then there is the hole at the bottom of the skull where the spine connects. In a normal human, this hole is near the center so your head balances. In the Paracas skulls, it is pushed further back. This means the way their heads sat on their necks was fundamentally different. You cannot change the position of the spine by binding the head. That is determined by genetics. But the visual evidence is just the start. The real shock came when they decided to test the code inside the bone, the European connection in ancient America. The shape of the bone was enough to start a fight, but the DNA was supposed to settle it. Mainstream scientists were confident. They thought the test would prove once and for all that these were just local indigenous people. They expected the genetic map to look exactly like every other ancient tribe in South America. So the research teams went to work. This wasn't a sloppy job. They used full hazmat suits, gloves, and masks to make sure no modern DNA contaminated the samples. They drilled deep inside the skull to get the pure, untouched powder from the core. They took samples from the roots of the red hair. When the data finally loaded onto the screens, the lab technicians were confused. The results didn't make sense. The DNA did not match the local tribes. It didn't match the people who crossed the land bridge from Asia 15,000 years ago. Basically, the DNA looked like it had been teleported from the other side of the planet. The test results revealed haplogroups. These are like genetic family names. The Paracas skulls belong to haplogroup U2E. This is a European marker. Finding this group in a 3,000-year-old Peruvian mummy is technically impossible, according to the history books. It is like finding a Roman coin in an Egyptian tomb before Rome was built. The history books tell us that the oceans were giant barriers. They say nobody crossed the Atlantic until Columbus. But the Paracas DNA says the oceans were highways. It suggests that 3,000 years ago, a group of people from the Middle East or Europe got on ships and sailed all the way to the Pacific coast of Peru. And get this, it wasn't just one sample. They tested again and again. The results kept pointing to the same place, the Black Sea, Crimea, and ancient Persia. This blows the lid off the idea that civilization started in isolated pockets. It suggests that a central culture spread out and planted seeds of knowledge all over the world. Imagine the scene. A fleet of ships lands on the coast of Peru. Out step these tall men and women. They have pale skin, red hair, and massive elongated heads. This explains the hair. Native American populations genetically have thick, black, straight hair. But the Paracas mummies had wavy, auburn red hair. Some of it was even strawberry blonde. Finding a population of red-headed kings on the coast of Peru doesn't fit the map. But the DNA confirms it. The genetic data also suggests that the Paracas elite were very inbred. They married their brothers and sisters. Why? To keep the bloodline pure. They were trying to preserve their specific genetic traits, the red hair, the large brains, the massive height. They knew they were different, and they didn't want to dilute their royal blood. Most Native American populations are blood type O. It is almost 100% consistent. But the Paracas mummies were found to have blood type A and B, and some researchers claim to have found Rh-negative blood. This is the rarest blood type on Earth. The skeptics tried to say, oh, it's just contamination. But the labs ruled that out. The sequence was too complete. This creates a massive problem for the timeline. It forces us to ask how they got there. But more importantly, it forces us to ask who they really were. Escaping the lost continent, who were these people really? DNA tells us where their ancestors walked, but it doesn't tell us their story. To understand the Paracas, we have to get into the wild territory. We have to talk about the legends that every single culture on Earth shares, but science ignores. We have to talk about the Great Flood. Almost every ancient culture, from the Bible to the Sumerian tablets to the Incan legends, tells the same story. Thousands of years ago, there was a massive global civilization. It was advanced, it was powerful, and it was destroyed by water. The alternative theory here is that the Paracas people were refugees. They were the survivors of a lost continent, possibly Atlantis. When their homeland was destroyed by a cataclysm, the elite survivors got on their ships and scattered to the highest places on Earth. They went to the mountains of Peru. They went to the plateau of Egypt. This explains why we see the same features in all these places. In Egypt, look at the statues of Akhenaten. He has the same elongated skull. He has the same strange body. Is it a coincidence that the Sun Kings of Egypt and the Sun Kings of Peru looked exactly the same? Is it a coincidence that both cultures built pyramids and mummified their dead? The Incas said that long before they arrived, a race of Viracocha walked the land. They were tall, bearded, and had white skin. They built the massive stone megaliths that we still can't figure out how to move. They taught the people how to farm, and then they vanished. The Paracas mummies fit this description perfectly. But there is a darker theory, the Watcher theory. Ancient texts like the Book of Enoch talk about the Watchers, advanced beings who came down and mated with human women. Their children were called the Nephilim. They were giants. The Bible says, "There were giants in the earth in those days." The Paraka skulls are huge. The skeletons found in the region are often much taller than the average local person of that time. Some researchers believe that the elongated head wasn't just a fashion choice, but a biological trait of this hybrid race. Maybe the missing sagittal suture is because they aren't fully human in the way we define it. The theory goes that as these demigods bred with the local human population, the genetic traits started to fade, the heads got smaller. So, to keep the look of the gods, the normal humans started binding their babies' heads. This is a crucial distinction. The royal Parakas were born with long heads. The common people bound their heads to mimic the royals. This created the confusion that archaeologists are still stuck in today. They find a bound skull and say, "See, it's all fake." But they ignore the massive natural skulls that inspired the trend. Parakas might have been the last stronghold of this ancient race. They were holed up on a desert peninsula, protecting their bloodline and their secret knowledge. They were the last of the High Lords from a world that had been washed away, and they had the technology to prove it. How did they know about germs? We can't talk about the Parakas people without talking about what they could do. If they were just a primitive desert tribe, they should have been struggling just to find water. Instead, they were creating art and medicine that we would struggle to replicate today. Let's look at the textiles. The Parakas mantles are considered the finest textiles ever created in the history of humanity. That is not an exaggeration. Modern experts have analyzed these fabrics. They are 3,000 years old, but the colors are as bright as the day they were dyed. They used 190 different shades of color. Most ancient cultures used 5 or 6, but the crazy part is the thread count. Some of these fabrics have a thread count of 500 to 600 threads per inch. Your luxury bed sheets today might have 300. To weave something that fine, you need magnification. You need lenses. Did the Parakas people have magnifying glasses? There is no record of it, but the cloth proves they had something. You cannot weave thread that thin with the naked eye without making mistakes. Yet, the patterns are flawless. But the most shocking display of their intelligence was their surgery. The Parakas people were masters of trepanation, cutting holes in the human skull. In most of the ancient world, if you had a hole drilled in your head, you died. But in Parakas, we find hundreds of skulls with these holes. And here is the catch: the bone is healed. This means the patient survived. The survival rate in Parakas was upwards of 60 to 70%. That is higher than the survival rate for skull surgery during the American Civil War, thousands of years later. They were performing successful neurosurgery in the desert without antibiotics, without electricity, and without steel tools. They used obsidian, volcanic glass that is sharper than any modern scalpel. They likely used local plants as anesthesia and antiseptics. So, what do you think? Are these just deformed humans, or are we looking at a lost branch of the family tree? Why is the scientific community so afraid of this DNA? Leave a comment below with your theory. If you want more forbidden history, hit that like button and subscribe. See you in the next one.